Dr. Timothy Saar. He is a practicing psychologist here in West Virginia for over the last 20 years and has a broad range of experience in clinical diagnosis, therapy, and forensic evaluations. He received his PhD from Cambridge College in Los Angeles, California, his master's degree in counseling psychology from Marymount, Los Angeles, California. His master's degree in counseling, his bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Southern California. How he ended up in West Virginia, he'll have to tell you, because I'm still trying to figure out. I'm still trying to figure it out. But he is the director of Saar Psychology. He works extensively in family court and is an adjunct professor at Marshall University Graduate College since 1998, and he is on the faculty of West Virginia State University. And I'm sure that a lot of you all have dealt with him and worked with him in your cases in family court. And so let's welcome Dr. Saar.
Is the volume okay with regard to this? I have a tendency to walk around quite a bit. I think it's just a combination of ADHD and the amount of coffee that I drink prior to having to give a presentation. I do appreciate you braving the cold to come out here. I have to confess, when I woke up this morning, which was much earlier than anticipated, having told my children there was no school in the morning, and all of them managed to get up still about 6:30 anyway, and so I didn't get a chance to sleep until 8. But it was quite snowy outside, and I didn't think we were going to make it, but then it cleared up, so I appreciate that. I do want to just give a few moments to talk about how this particular talk came about, so you get a rough idea of its origins. About 2 months ago, the family court judges had their CLEs here in this same room. I don't know if it's this one, but somewhere up in this area. And I presented this talk at that time. Ms. Tackett was present there and asked if I would present today. Though that talk was only an hour long, I think this is an hour and a half. So you're getting the director's uncut version. Well, hopefully it has some extra features with regard to that. I did practice it over the weekend a couple times. I have a tendency to talk somewhat fast with those things, and I might have had some wine when I was practicing over the weekend. People say I sound better when they're actually drinking, and so hopefully you went downstairs about a bit. But that's what we're going to talk about. The original talk came in a family court case here in Pinal County, in front of a judge that I've had the pleasure of testifying many times. I really enjoy his courtroom. It's always very well run and very structured. And I was retained by the mother's attorney, a lawyer that I've worked with on numerous occasions, to write a report about shared parenting. The child was about 1.5 years old, so obviously there was no interview of the child. At that time, I submitted my report that recommended that she have primary care with increasing visitations with the father at that time. And so the other attorney obviously was not that happy with my report. And that attorney, I've actually done more work, and I'm getting ready to testify for him tomorrow, but obviously he retained another expert to have a different opinion with regards to that. And so we were both scheduled to testify, and I got called away for an abuse and neglect hearing in a different part of the state. So I didn't testify that day, so the other doctor did first, and I got a copy of his transcript, so I was able to see his response to my report, which is an unusual circumstance to be in. And we agreed on an awful lot of things, some of that I had supervised years ago. We're going to go over some of the foundations that he and I agreed in with regards to that, though he did disagree with the shared parenting plan because of the distance between the mother and father. It's about 2 hours on the interstate with regards to that. And then during the course of that case, the other attorney, as I testified, and obviously the attorney who retained me, my testimony went smooth because they don't argue with me. And the other attorney asked me if I was familiar with this particular researcher, and I was not, which is a little bit disturbing because we try to keep up on most of the research in the field of psychology, especially with regards to attachment issues. But I was familiar with the journal that they had mentioned. Actually, I get that journal. And so he had a couple articles, and he approached me in kind of an unguarded fashion and asked me, would these opinions change my opinion? And so I read the abstract. If you're familiar with psychological journals, there's that abstract on the top. And we're going to talk about the abstract and some of the dangers that are involved in those things. But I read the abstract, and I had a couple of thoughts as I'm sitting on the stand. And one was, oh crap, this is very different in my opinion. These are pretty current articles. And the other was, kind of a short prayer to God: if you're ever going to have an earthquake in Charleston, please let it be now, so I can leave the building and come back later with more research. But that didn't happen. I waited for a few moments, and there was no earthquake. And the judge looked at me kind of funny. And so then I read the abstract, and that's where I'm going to leave you right now. That's the position I'm in. And we're going to talk about this case throughout the course of my talk. So when I did leave, myself and the other psychologists got together, because we know each other, and he was kind enough to send me the articles, which we're going to go over today, for his opinion. And so then I went back and did some more research in those articles that I'm going to share with you. And that's what brought this talk. Because the idea of shared parenting for very young children comes up all the time in family court, at least with regards to my office. We're frequently called in. And we also need to make sure that the information we provide you or provide the courts is what my profession currently thinks is true. And granted, sometimes my profession changes its minds every so often, but at least I'm going to try to give you the most current results. Obviously, you see two names up there, myself and Ms. Nelson. If you ever work with my office, she's one of my other psychologists. She's not presenting, but she was very instrumental in putting this slide presentation together, and I just want to make sure that she got some credit for that. So this is how it came out. The other thing with regards to looking at research, and psychologists like to quote research, and you can find research to support just about anything that you want in psychology. And so one of the things I'm hoping that you'll leave with today is how to critically look at research with regards to shared parenting, and what questions you should be asking when somebody gives you an opinion. You should not swallow hook, line, and sinker. That there is never a silver bullet. In fact, Ms. Pack and I were talking earlier on, she used the phrase cookie cutter, but there is no cookie cutter with regards to shared parenting at this age. And we are frequently called upon to give our opinion about that. Can you tell me the 4 things that we need to look for, and then we know how to do shared parenting. But the reality is it's not that simple. And so one of the things we want to do is help you to understand that and be on guard for that. Some of the early research, and these are the things that has been consistent in psychology for many, many years. In fact, the other psychologists and I all agreed on this. And so this talks about attachment in general, which is at the heart of shared parenting for very young children. Attachment theory was developed quite a number of decades ago, back in the 50s or so, late 40s, early 50s, and it relates to, obviously, attachment between parent and child. And that was then later on used to help with regards to divorce cases. And of course, we're going to talk about how divorce has changed, and shared parenting has changed. It's no longer just as simple as it used to be 30 or 40 years ago. I want to read this quote here. I can actually see this screen. Attachment is repeated experiences of parents reducing uncomfortable emotions such as fear, sadness, and anxiety, enabling a child to feel soothed and safe when upset. It becomes encoded in implicit memory, and implicit memory has its expectations and then as mental models or schematics of attachment. This helps them develop a secure base. So attachment is an ongoing process. It's not something that happens with 1 or 2 visits or 1 or 2 weeks. With regards to that. We're going to see that it's a developing process that's going to become relevant with regards to shared parenting. There's other research is by Dr. Michael Lamb. We're going to see this name on a regular basis. This is one of the names that you may want to be familiar with. He has a number of very user-friendly books, and it's wonderful with regards to his input on shared parenting. And this is the most recent article I can find, 2018. I'm going to take a look at this one. Attachment forms when infants come to realize that specific people consistently respond in appropriate and positive ways to the signals, which is obviously used for their caregivers, especially in times of distress. Consistent and appropriate responding, which is, we're going to take a look at that, becomes very key in developing attachment, creates a sense of trust on the part of those children. And that sense of trust is further reinforced by demonstrating sensitivity by adults in other contexts. So it's an ongoing process, once again, that Michael Lamb talks about. If any of you had a Psych 1 class, you know about Dr. W.Va. He is probably one of the first attachment theorists. He was actually a psychiatrist. We won't hold that against him, but just one of our psychologists back in the 50s. He passed away in 1990. He's considered basically the father of attachment theory. He described attachment as a lasting psychological connectedness between human beings, and that it has a huge impact on our interpersonal life. So we think not only does it deal with the child the ages 2, 3, and 4, but it affects the type of people we then relate to as adults. So we think that it has lifelong impact. And this, again, has been fairly consistent throughout the study of psychology. So who we pick to marry, who we pick to date, how we relate to those individuals, we think is formed early on with our relationship with our mother and father. There are a number of stages of development. You obviously don't need to memorize this, just for your own reference. When the child is first born, they don't really care who's around. In all honesty, they just poo, pee, and cry. Things along those lines. Not much is going on, well, at least with regards to the kid. Now, these aren't exact time frames. Like any stages in psychology, as soon as you hit 24 months, now you're 25, you're in the next stage. It's a fluid stages. So, and part of that's dependent on development. If you have a child that's got some cognitive disabilities, or maybe something on the autism spectrum disorder, or chronic mental illness, or chronic medical illness, that's going to affect how the attachment develops. I'm going to talk about some of those special circumstances down the road. But you can kind of see here in those first 2 to 3 years, attachment becomes very important with the growth. And that's the focus of the population that we're looking at. This little scheme here, I'm not quite sure where I found this. It's for those of you who like diagrams, it looks at healthy and unhealthy parenting styles. So you can go home tonight and see if you're doing okay with regards to your children and how we're interacting with them. Attachment figure, if it's sufficient, we are basically attentive and caring to our children. Not all the time, we just need to be good enough parents. But are we there emotionally for our children? Can we put our own needs above them on a fairly regular basis? And if we can, we then think these children have a good chance of developing healthy relationships as they get older. If a parent is inconsistent, and there are a number of reasons why a parent may be inconsistent. It may be some form of chronic mental illness. It may be substance abuse, and we'll talk about some of the impacts with regards to that. They may love their child, they may be there when they're present, but they may at times be gone for a month or two for whatever particular reason. Or we may have a child that's born at 2 months old, and then the father goes on deployment for a year. Is that going to impact the attachment with regards to that child? The reality is yes. So there are a number of things that can impact attachment, not all negative, some no fault of the parent. It's just life sometimes that makes you deal with it. And then there are those parents that have no ability whatsoever, or shouldn't have had children, can't form attachment. And those children have great more difficulty in life with regards to forming bonding issues, not only with the parents, but with anybody in the future. This is just some other ways to say exactly what I said when I had to do the director's cut. This was something I left out of the other presentation. It's now on this one. Suitable for framing, if you want. But you get an idea of all the factors that go into it, right? How we respond to our children in many ways is dictated upon how they respond to us. It's kind of give and take. This is why I've had 4 children, so I've got some experience with regards to raising them, but the verdict's still out on some of the younger ones with that. But there's that interaction with regards to our children. So how does this apply to what you guys do with regards to family court cases? Throughout the last 30 or 40 years, since attachment theory came about, it's been applied to a variety of court cases, and then this has also formed additional research. The thing about psychology is research tends to beget other research. Somebody down at USC may write a paper, and then somebody at W.Va takes a look at it and says, that's very interesting, I wonder if it's very similar here in the Appalachian area. And that's how we get different researchers. And when we talk about limits of research, and sometimes people try to fool you when they testify on the stand about this research says this, and it's all encompassing. Many times it is not. But the idea was to look at attachment, and then to look at other factors with regards to shared parenting down the road. So can you trust research? Can you trust what your expert witness says on the stand with the articles? Now, I told you about sitting on the stand, so I'm still on that stand now, sweating because these articles are different than what I have said. Right? And again, this is a judge that I've been in front of many, many years and have no desire to look foolish in front of this person. The first journal that the attorney handed me was from 2007, Journal of Family Psychology. It's a good journal. And we're going to talk about this author, Probriscus and Litem, from Arizona State U, because we're going to see his name down the road, which is why I had some concerns with these articles that were presented to me in the family court case. And so this is 2007, and his research stated that the more time children lived with their fathers after divorce, the better the current relationships were with their fathers, independent of parental conflict, excluding domestic bonds. And that's a pretty obvious statement. Somehow I got a grant to do this research and actually state the obvious. But that came out in 2007. He didn't specify the ages at divorce, which was critical with that. So it's just kind of a general statement saying, if the divorce goes smooth and everybody's good to each other, the kids do well. It did highlight the importance of fathers relationship. We had fairly strong fathers movements at times, and that has impacted some of the research, sometimes in a positive way and sometimes in a negative way. And so that was 2007, that research. The other article the attorney handed me was 2014 from Richard Rorschach out of Psychology, Public Policy, and Law. It's our journal that looks at combining psychology practices to legal practices. It's an excellent journal. And these are the questions this journal was trying to ask. And this is what I'm reading on the stand in front of the judge. How much of young children's time should be spent predominantly in the care of the same parent, or divided more evenly between both parents? That's one of the questions we'll take a look at in the course. And should children under the age of 4 sleep in the same home every night, or spend overnights in both parents' homes? And so those are some of the same questions that we're asking today. What should we do with these young children? And in his abstract, he says a broad consensus of accomplished researchers and practitioners, they had 110 in the back of his report, agreed with him that in normal circumstances, now I underline in normal circumstances, because that's going to be key to this talk today, because we don't get involved in the normal circumstances. By the time a judge feels you are needed, or certainly when my office gets involved, these are abnormal circumstances. So some of the black and white stuff as we talk about it is not going to be applicable to your types of cases. Evidence supports shared residential arrangement for children under 4 whose parents live apart from each other. So he's stating that it's okay. If you've got a 2-year-old child, just a week on, week off, the kid will be fine. And this was the exact opposite of the opinion I just presented in front of the judge. So my brain is slightly going a mile a minute with regards to the judge, trying to figure out how I can get out of this situation, how I can save face in my testimony. So the other article they handed me was for Briscoe again. That's a 2007 guy. Right? Now it's 2017. He states current studies show that more overnight parenting time with fathers, up to and including equal number of overnights with both parents when children were toddlers, so under 2, as well as when they were infants, were associated with more secure relationships with each parent. So basically saying it's a good idea during challenging and uncertain emerging adulthood. Okay? It's interesting, these 2 authors know each other because he quotes the other author's research in his paper, and he actually advised the other authors of that research. So they're a strong part of the fathers movement, which we're going to see kind of biased their conclusions with regard to this. So he's saying there's no big deal, just separating as often as you want with regards to that. The problem with this research, and I didn't discover this until later on, was that, I don't know if you're familiar with how research works, at least in psychology. You have to have a population to study. And if you're a researcher who does psychology, you're a professor at one of the universities nearby. They all have a graduate psychology department. They all have to do studies in order to keep their tenure. Right? And so one of your populations are students. Right? It's either students or you're in a teaching hospital and it's patients. And it's usually very limited. As kind of as a side note, I think all my schooling obviously was in Southern California. But between my freshman and sophomore year, my parents sent me back to Boston to go to Harvard for the summer, since they wouldn't set me during the regular school year. You paid enough money to let you go for the summer. And so, but they didn't give me money to have fun in Boston. They just put me up in a dorm. One of the ways I earned money all summer was to be a subject in an experiment. You would go to the graduate department, if you signs up, you do this for 2 hours, this for 3 hours, they give you $50, $70. And that's how I earned my fun money in Boston that summer. So somewhere there's studies based on my mental health in Boston with regards to that. But just keep that in mind when you're looking at studies. Most of these studies are on college students. Even the original Minnesota, the MMPI, which you're probably familiar with, was actually based on the population in Minnesota. You have to be crazy to live in Minnesota. So we know that things are somewhat screwed with regards to that. Now they expanded when they did the MMPI too with that. But keep the population of the study. Every study has to put limitations on it, but no one ever reads the limitations. Right? So his population, the university he was at, was a fairly affluent university. He basically interviewed kids of middle and upper class about their problems, looking back hindsight with those relationships. So it's a good study, he's ethical, but how relevant it is to some of the stuff that we're taking a look at. So I was a little bit disturbed by that, because it was very different than my opinion I had given courts through a number of years, and I want to make sure I haven't screwed up families for the last 10 years with my recommendations. One of the things that I do in my practice is reach out to people that I think know much, much more than I do. And these are the people that publish his books. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Dr. Stahl. I think he actually presented at the family courts conference contact, so they knew him. And I had been under his training a couple times, I think once in DC and someplace. And so I emailed him, because their email addresses on their PowerPoints that they hand out, to ask him, to send him these articles and say, what's going on here? Have I been duped? And then, so I emailed us, and I got an email right away back, and it says, he's on sabbatical in Australia. So I thought, crap. I wasn't going to get my answer. Well, I felt crap for 2 things. One is I wasn't going to get my question answered. The other is I was in South Charleston and he was in Australia, and that just didn't seem fair. And so, but a couple hours later, he did email me back. And I had done some brown nosing in the first part of my email saying I had all his books and been to his conferences, and he was polite. And he said about this author that he felt that he had never had a 50-50 plan he didn't like. That he felt that this author, although certainly ethical, was a strong father's rights group, and that may bias his opinion with regards to that. It doesn't mean that fathers at times don't get screwed out of some shared parenting, but also you can't let that dictate your opinion. And that made some sense when I started looking at where the research came from. All these books are excellent if you're looking for things to increase your library. That last book, Representing Children, that's his newest book, came out just a couple months ago. His wife's a lawyer. He's obviously a psychologist, and it's designed for guardian license. It may be one of the ones you may want to pick up. It does both family court up to abuse and neglect, and I continue with regards to that. And I have all the other ones. And it's in your, I think the PowerPoint presentation is actually on the website, if you get really interested. So I emailed him and he got that. So I was feeling boisterous about going back, because I was going to testify again in the same court, because we didn't finish our argument. Okay. And later, now back to W.Va, remember he was the psychiatrist that did attachment. He did soften his opinion about it. People originally took it as you can only have one attachment figure, which is usually the mother, and that you can never separate the child from the mother, because it would harm not only to the relationship to the father, but it would harm his relationship to the mother. Right? And that was his original line of thought. But as he progressed, he did soften his stance. And this was like in the 70s when he softened it, but people kind of forgot that part. On the idea of monotropy, which is, you can only have one attachment. He said, no, the infant can have several types of attachment. The attachment has to be formed. Right? And so, just because you're automatically a parent doesn't mean you're fully attached to the child's attached to you. There are a number of things that may impact that attachment. Or it doesn't have to be a parent with that. The case that I'm talking about, they separated while she was pregnant. He disowned, said the child wasn't his. And so when they got a paternity test, the child was already 2 months old. So he lost all that time, all the prenatal involvement. And then even then he wouldn't go with the visitation. He wanted his way or no way. It's hard to believe, but that's kind of what he wanted. Wouldn't take the shared parenting time offered to him by the female. And when she moved down to her mother's home. So her mother was very involved in the prenatal care and the birth of the child and all that kind of stuff. And so when she went back to work, the lawyer was asking, how can this child attach so easily to the grandmother, and yet you caution against the father? And my response was, the grandmother is a primary attachment figure. Right? She was there at the birth of the child. She was there living in the same home, and after I interviewed her, she played an integral part in raising that child, changing the diet, feeding that, helping with the nighttime feedings. But it didn't matter that the child had no concept that this was the grandmother. The reality was it was an attachment. So that's how I felt I could say that the child still needed time to develop an attachment to the father, and not so much to the grandmother, because there already was that attachment. And he cautions against that. So what is the current thinking? What do we think right now, at least for this month? And again, we can find support for anything in psychology. It's probably true for other rules. I would encourage you when you talk to your expert to make sure they don't cherry pick articles. Many times all they use is the abstract on those, because the articles cost money, in all honesty. You can Google search a topic and it comes up and all they ever show you is the abstract, but you got to pay $60 or $50 for the article. Most people don't want to do that, so they just print out the abstract. The problem is that the article has all the limitations of the studies and cautions with that. And so you can come across misrepresenting the author's intent. And I think this is what happened when they presented those to me in court, that they didn't fully read the articles and the limitations that were sent. So we don't want to cherry pick. We want to read these research and also read how the study should be applied. At the end of every report or at the end of any research, it's going to tell you what population should we use this with. Is it relevant for the people or the child that you're representing, or is it very unique to something else? So it is important to take a look at that, or obviously if the psychologist or others doing it, ask them for a copy or her for a copy of the report. They should have a full copy of the report. They just hand you an abstract, and you want to roll your eyes. So what's going on in my brain now? Not now, but then. So, again, I'm trying to express to the judge that these studies themselves don't make the policy. You know, the problem is I don't have much time. Have you ever been sitting on the stand where they stop it and allow to read over your I don't know, testify. But you're sitting there, there's nothing in front of you, so there's a camera, you can see what you look like on the stand, you think, dear God, my tie doesn't match. And so I'm reading these studies, taking a look at these things and seeing what's going on, and what can we tell the judge with these things? How does it apply to what's going on? There are some good studies, and what we're looking for is meta-studies. Meta-studies are studies on studies. Right? I talked about how research kind of goes around the country. This psychologist does something here in California, this in West Virginia, this in Texas. And after there's 30 or 40 studies, psychologists come along and say, I'm going to study the studies. And they do some statistical magic, and it comes out, and they put all those factors in, and they say, out of all these studies, these are the factors we think are most relevant. So they kind of filter out the crap and kind of leave you with the good stuff with that. And so if you're getting research from your expert witness, it'll say on the top, this is a meta-analysis study. Those are the best types of studies, because they're looking at things throughout different parts of the country or different parts of the world. So again, let's look at that abstract. These findings do not support policy that would urge parents and courts to generally be cautious about frequent overnight, or to begin with few overnights and gradually step up to frequent overnights. Again, this is the exact opposite of what I had just recommended when I'm testifying, and now I'm reading this out loud in the courtroom. When there are no extenuating circumstances, such as parental mental illness, or previous absence from a child's life, and so forth. And that's where I think I was able to help myself out with regards to the testimony. Not that the gentleman was mentally ill. I mean, I don't know if he was mentally ill, but he did a parental fitness on. But sometimes mental illness impacts one's ability to parent. But the other is the bond was never formed. You can't take a 2-year-old and rip it away from its mother for a whole week to go to somebody that does not know on a regular basis. That's going to cause the child some trauma. And our solution was, can we just go gradually? Can the guy come down and stay at a hotel for the weekend? The ex-wife was going to pay for it, and just develop working with the child along these lines. They didn't want to go for that. And obviously they recommend discretion for the courts. So, what are some of the special circumstances to take a look at with regards to? So these are the areas that you're going to be involved with guardian items. Domestic violence is one of the huge red flags with regards to shared parenting or anything that we do with regards to our parental fitness evaluation. It's usually guys, so they may say, well, I've never hit the child, but the reality is you beat the crap out of the mother on a regular basis. It means your impulse control is poor. What's going to happen when you have a colicky baby at home? When you consider this, how well does he function with regards to this? Any type of credible risk of neglect or history of neglect. Right? We have blended families, and it's not unusual sometimes where someone may have had a CPS case, and maybe it was unfounded, but we still have concerns. Right? Because some CPS cases are handled very, very well, and some aren't handled well, even though we think there may be abuse going on. Any type of physical violence to the child, any type of sexual abuse, or possible sexual abuse to the child, I would say those are areas of caution that need extra work. History of psychological abuse. Now the child is quite young at this point, but what you may have sometimes is multiple marriages in the past, and they may have no contact with other children. So as an evaluator, if we're allowed to talk to some of those other children, we'll get an idea of why don't you have one. A current case that is going now had a 7-year-old that's having some difficulty with the father, but the 14-year-old has cut off all contact with the biological father. And I requested to interview her. It's unusual for someone not to want to see their biological parent when they're claiming nothing's going on. And I don't think there's any type of alienation. What about restrictive gatekeeping, if there's any history of that? Gatekeeping and alienation are kind of on the same continuum with regards to that. There's obviously no such thing as parental alienating syndrome with regards to that, because it's not a syndrome per se. But if you do enough family court work, you know there are people that at times really wish the other parent would just die and do everything they can with regard to destroy that relationship. That's an alienation, active pursuit of destroying the child's relationship with the other parent. Negative gatekeeping is more, I'm just going to be difficult to make it hard for my spouse to have some contact. I won't be away when they call, I'll schedule doctor's appointments, things along that would interfere with the person's visitation. So if there's a history of that, this is going to impact your ability to do shared parenting and comply with whatever recommendations you do for the judge for shared parenting. Obviously, a history of child abduction. I'm not quite sure why that was in the book. That should be a given. If you've got somebody that has a history of kidnapping kids, I wouldn't give them any unsupervised visits. That's just me. What about special needs children with those? does. Anything on the autism spectrum that disorder has. They develop attachment in a different manner than the normal child. What about severe medical complications when the child's in the hospital for several months at a time, or has a very complex medical condition where they have to go back and forth? This is going to impact their ability to form attachments, and you need to consider that when you start to assign who's going to be the primary caregiver for that period of time. So these are special circumstances, and sometimes just geographical distance. The case that I've been using as an example was only 2 hours on the interstate, so it wasn't a huge way with regards to that. We mentioned Dr. Lamb earlier on. That was the second or third slide. These are his books. They're also very user-friendly with regards to that. I encourage that. If you only had to pick one or two, I'd go for Dr. Stahl. That's probably more relevant to what you guys have to do with guardian ad litem. He just came out in 2018 with his article. He said, consistent with attachment theory, the evidence suggests that children benefit when parenting plans allow them to maintain meaningful and positive relationships with both parents. Again, this is kind of a no-job thing. If we can have healthy relationships with mom and dad, children do better. It's not the divorce itself that is destructive to children. It's how the parents manage that divorce that's destructive to the child. People can get divorced, and children do. I mean, based on statistics, always half of us here have been divorced. I'm in the club with that. So, but my divorce was very, very smooth with regard to that thing. You can ask her what she says.
Now
right?
we know why it's
Yeah, no, it's part of the divorce thing. You've got to go as far away as possible. But I did have full custody, so that's good. Then he says, it is clear that outcomes are better when children have strong supportive relationships with their parents post-separation, and worse when there is continued intense conflict. And again, these are the cases that you're probably going to be involved with. These when mom and dad think they're doing what is right for the child, but really are harming the child. And these aren't the case when there's legitimate domestic violence or psychological issues or something along those lines where the child's in danger. Sometimes it is just where they used to love each other based on their Facebook accounts, and now they hate each other. They can't stand each other with these things. And they're going to basically say that the child shouldn't be around them. So how do we put this together, the conflicting types of information that we have? We want to use an integrated psychodevelopmental perspective in regards to this area to establish developmentally sensitive resolution. We have a couple goals for this with regards to our shared parenting that protects both the vulnerability of early childhood. So we want the child to be safe with that, because they can't speak for themselves. That's why this is such a vulnerable population. You know, when you interview a 10-year-old, they can tell you what's going on. If you have a 2-year-old, they really can't communicate. You just have to look at some basic developmental signs. And number 2, those that support lifelong parent-child relationships, both now and in the future. So we need to consider a very young child, like the case I was involved with. I wasn't going to recommend he get week on, week off in the very beginning, but that was in the future, and not very far in the future if he cooperates. We wanted to establish a relationship, because we don't want to damage this relationship. I'm sure he loves his child a great deal. And keep in mind, parents can develop attachment much quicker than children can to us, right? So when you first see the sonogram or your child being born, this is immediate attachment, hopefully, with regards to our child. So we develop this love and attachment right away. With regards to children are not that way. It's the interaction pattern between us and them. So attachment takes longer for children. We need to resist the urge to prescribe fixed formulas, which is sometimes what people want, about numbers of overnights, for the age that it should begin. So it does, and this is where responsibility, I guess, should fall on you folks with regards to looking at these cases and looking at all the circumstances and what should we do with regards to this. And it gets more complex because right now we're only dealing with one child. The case I was in only had one child. So what happens if I have a 2-year-old and an 11-year-old? Things get more complex with dealing with shared types of parenting. So what's an inclusive solution look like? The American Family Conciliation Courts has their own association. Actually, it's the Association of Family Conciliation Courts. I don't know if anybody's a member of that. If you just type in AFCC, it's a group, national group of lawyers and psychologists. They always have conferences in really nice places. The last one was in San Diego, so we usually pick warm areas. It sounds pretty good. But they're beneficial to go to. I like them because I get to go to the conferences that the trainings that the lawyers go to. So I have an idea of what's important to you folks. Also, it's nice to go to the ones where they talk about how to cross-examine an expert witness. and you get a chance to interact with some psychologists and know some of the research. So it's a very good group of folks, and they have a quarterly journal that usually has a ton of good information. So an integrated perspective that the goals of attachment and early parenting, typically for the father, involved with very young children after separation are mutually attainable and mutually reinforcing rather than exclusive choices. Which means it can work. Now, most of the time, the cases that we get, it's more difficult. And my office also does a number of post-high conflict, post-marital, post-divorce, high conflict divorce counseling. And these are the most difficult people to see to deal with. They just dislike each other tremendously, so the judge forces them to sit in our office for 1 hour a week for a period of time. We keep all the sharp objects hidden when they come in. But the idea is to teach these parents that if you cooperate, your child will do much, much better, and you as a parent will do much better with that. It always confuses me on these folks why they wouldn't want to, assuming that the other parent is somewhat normal, utilize that parent. I have 4 children still living at home. Our biggest concern is finding somebody brave enough to babysit my children at night. God knows whether we get just hard to find. So how cool would it be to actually have the other parent who I trusted, who the parents trusted, to watch them, to allow you and your new partner to escape. But they don't seem to focus on that. The optimal goal for family is something called a triadic secure base, and it's just what it sounds like. Mom, dad, kid, or kids, children with that. Developed through co-parenting environment that supports the child's secure attachment. With each parent recognizing the other parent's importance to the child. So when you're interviewing your parents, if all they do is dog the other parent, and you get the impression they would be happy if this person just disappeared, right? You're going to have a much more difficult time, and the child's going to have a more difficult time. Whether or not I love that person anymore or not, we have to acknowledge that this child still needs a relationship, even if they have some difficulty. I think I might have skipped a subject on substance abuse, which is one of our biggest things. We do an awful lot of parental fitness evaluations and abuse and neglect, and probably 80 to 85% are substance abuse related to these things. And I think that that's a different category to take a look at, because recovery takes time. And I'm hoping this is consistent with the talk. I think you just had a substance abuse talk before, so I say something completely different than her. I don't know if it's a he or she, just pay attention to them, since that was the topic. But children love their parents with regards to it. So unless there's clear evidence of extreme sexual abuse, extreme physical abuse, then obviously we put them in foster care with regards to that. But what if somebody's just having struggles with alcohol or with painkillers or things along those lines? We need to try to maintain the bond. If we think there's a chance we're going to unify down the road with that child. So if you take a newborn away from the mother or the parents, and they're in foster care for a year or two, we've now significantly messed up that attachment to that parent. We're going to make it very difficult for us to return that child to them, because the child's going to feel the loss of the foster parent. So it's kind of a problem that we as a system has created. So if you think that parent's going to maybe succeed, and they may have several relapses, substance abuse is very difficult to get over, you need to work and maintain that attachment to the children at some level, whether it's supervised or whatever it may be, or whatever you can do when you're accounting. But if you think there's a chance of getting them back in the home, you just can't keep them away from the parent in the next 6 months, especially very young, because that's going to cause some psychological damage. Caution against care during the first 3 visits are not supported in general. The limited available research does substantiate some caution about higher frequency overnight schedules for young children. That's the population that we're talking about. Particularly when the child's relationship with the second parent has not been established and or they're in frequent conflict about what to do. So if they can't agree on anything, or one child, one parent is more responsible for medication, let's say there's medical care. It doesn't happen so much with these young children, but many times people disagree about the diagnosis of ADHD, so they get medication. The judges sometimes will send them to our office and say, does this child suffer from ADHD? And that's really as far as we can go. We can say that they do. Medication, it really is a personal choice. We can take a look to see if they're successful or how willing the parents are to practice the medication. That's an example of people disagreeing with regards to parenting.
And what do you do? I mean, for instance, if I think the child needs to be on medication, so the 4 or 5 days they're with me, they're on their medication, and the 4 or 5 days they're with their father, they're not. I mean, this is a horrible situation that we've got this kid.
Yeah, and that maybe when the judge has to kind of order something with that, or could become some kind of compromise. And what we do in those cases, if you ever had something with you've been involved in our office or some of the other psychologists in the state, we give these questionnaires to teachers. And if we can do pre and post medication, it looks like sometimes medication, and obviously is a godsend for some hyperactive kids. It really does calm them down. They can take a weekend vacation from the meds, take a summer vacation, but allows them to focus. Now that's a smaller percentage than those who are actually given medication. I think it's somewhat overdiagnosed, especially with regards to young boys. But yeah, I mean, all we can do is say, yes, the child has this particular illness. The parent responds very well with that. I guess the judge has to do, or we can work on, because you can't bounce a child on medication. And I'm not a medical doctor, but I've seen there may be some medical conditions which you need to have medications. Sometimes parents disagree with the importance of that, and what do you do with regards to those things? I don't know if that actually answers it. I didn't actually ask if there's any questions. I think just kind of ramble. But if you do, just raise your hand. One of the things I mentioned the idea of an abstract, the studies. You all read the psychological study. Is that how it works? When you get a law article, does it have an abstract too? Because these are the points. I saw 3 days in law. Or your Tetris. With regards to the abstract and psychology work, they are like a preview of what is coming. So they're not very accurate. I happen to like superhero movies. I live in a fantasy world most of my time. And a while back, I saw this movie, a preview of this movie, and it had Batman and Superman, and thank God, Wonder Woman. And it looked like it was going to be a phenomenal movie. And I don't know if any of you saw the Justice League, but it really wasn't that great. So the preview looks really, really good. And that's what an abstract is. It sucks you in, so you buy the article, because we're getting online. And then you buy the article, and it's not quite what you need, which is why when someone quotes an abstract, be very careful with regards to what that says. Because they're not going to talk about the limitations. They're not going to talk about the funding of the article or the groups that author may belong in, or the type of population it should be. So just kind of, again, keep that in mind when that's what your expert shows you for support of their opinion. Right? They need to be able to, and that was my disagreement with the articles in the case I was talking about. Everything focused on the abstract without looking at all the exceptions to the rule. In the case I was in, had lots of exceptions. Right? We had a father that didn't acknowledge the birth of the child, didn't acknowledge that he was the father, and had minimal contact the first 18 months of that child's life, and then wanted to just jump right in and be full dad, right? Without really cooperating with the mother. And I didn't see any indication of negative gatekeeping with regards to this. And so I was very cautious to give this person. I think I found out later on that the judge kept things the way they were. Mother was primary caregiver, and then slowly going to work into that. So I think it worked out all right with regards to that. Did I review this book? No. Number 4. Secure development in this phase requires multiple supports to create both continuity and expanding caregiving environment. What this means is as the child grows, we need to be aware that they need other things in their life. Right? The newborn probably can get away with just mom and dad, maybe just mom with regards to that, and get involved in the situation. But later on, grandparents, school, religion, things along those lines, they need to be able to cooperate and deal with that. And when you're looking at attachment, when you're doing interviews with regards to that, even on an intact family, the attachment issues may be different for newborns. I mentioned I still have 3 children at home. My wife was a social worker when we met, but when we started having children, she decided to stay home full time. And so when our children were born, since I was in private practice, I went to work probably fairly quickly after the birth of the child, which I'm sure didn't really endear me at home. But if you were to look at my family in the first couple months of the children, you would probably say my wife was the attachment issue to our newborns. Because I was just starting private practice when I first went, so I'm out there 60 hours a week, and she's doing all the hard work with that. So if we got divorced back then, I'd be living in a Pinto right now if we did, but she would be the primary caregiver. That's just how it works. That was the nature of our relationship. I was going to work and she was going to stay home. And through no fault of it. So when you're doing your interviews, find out who actually takes care of the child. You know, I can be home and not be much help based on word of mouth with regards to that. So how much work do I do with regards to that? Find out who actually takes care of the child at home. And the reality is, most of the time, it's the woman, even when they both work. Probably making 2. I'll go with the other part of it. But explore that issue, because it is very important. And you're not diminishing the relationship with the father. You're just going to take it in stride, especially with a very, very young child. The older ones gets a little bit different, and parents have their own quotes to make deal with that. Number 5, a both and perspective on early attachment formation and joint parental involvement is warranted. A young child needs early organizational caregiving from at least one, and then ideally both parents. But if we can get at least one healthy person in our life as a child, that helps us a great deal in life. We want to make sure that we as professionals don't screw up that relationship with that child. And keep in mind that relationship may be with somebody who is recovering. They weren't ever harmful to the child except for their substance abuse. And that child may be very attached to that person. So we still need to respect that bond between the child and that parent. Again, the best idea is a track secure base, and this is when you're working with the parents to try to get them to cooperate. Can they understand the importance of their parents in the child's life? Even if they have some difficulties. We've had one just recently that the mother was a schizoaffective disorder and the father was not with that. So we had a newborn, the child was like 2 at the time. So what do we do with regards to that? The child obviously appears to be attached to the mother, but mother is unstable on her medications. So you could be chronically mentally ill, by the way, and still be a phenomenal parent. But we're looking at the history of your medication compliance, and some people, that's a fairly disturbing disorder, schizoaffective, right? Schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And so it's a lifelong disorder. You don't get over it. Panic attacks, you can recover from. And she was non-compliant. Some people don't respond to meds. And so in that case, we had to recommend just supervised visits until she can get quite a long time of stability. So we're looking at those types of situations. The small group of relevant studies to date do substantiate caution about high-frequency overnight visits, particularly when the child's security with the parent is unformed, or the parents cannot agree on how to share the custody. Equally true, theoretical caution against overnight affairs when the first 3 years is not being supported. So if you can get people with equal attachment, through equal agreement on how the child, they don't even like each other again, but can they co-parent? Which means they may not talk to each other a lot, but you can use Family Wizard or something else along those lines to get them to agree, this is how we're going to manage the child. This is going to be the newborn's schedule. Because obviously they're using schedule. Critical variables in considering readiness for and the likely impact of overnight schedules includes parents' psychological and social resources. In many cases, we'll get a call from the guardian ad litem where they have concerns about a parent's mental health. So we're asked to do a parental fitness evaluation, which is looking at one's ability to provide a safe and secure environment for the child and to engage in an appropriate shared parenting. And is there something that may impact that? And if there is, then that's obviously going to play into the types of shared parenting plans you recommend. So it may be something in your toolbox that you consider if you have some concerns about the parents' mental health. Social resources is just what do they have available to them. If you're dealing with a family that has lack of financial resources, you're going to have to adjust the types of things you recommend to them. People who are in poverty or have financial strain, which is a lot of folks in West Virginia, have more difficulty following through with different types of recommendations, even just getting from A to B. So those are the psychological and social resources, the nature of the parent dynamic. Find out how well they got along to begin with. Not when they're fighting now, but what was the relationship like? Was there ever a period of time that they cooperated? And could they resolve problems? And if you get that, then you've got a better prognosis for a shared parenting plan than if you did if they got married by mistake or someone got pregnant and they just decided to, or they're in Vegas one time and get married, something along those lines. So take a look at that. Also look at the parent-child relationship and separation. Again, that's looking at what the father did or the mother did to the child. This is also important here relative to the age of the child. You may have a preteen who doesn't want to go with dad, but you find out the relationship with dad has always been strained. That maybe he's always been just an unpleasant person, and that she didn't do much to begin with him. So that may come into play with regard to that. And it's not parental alienation, it's just dad not being a very nice guy. So we're looking at the prior relationships. Oops, that's backwards. Sorry. Considerations for determining post-separation overnight care for the young children. Right? And this is kind of your workbook page. These are things you want to kind of go through. That group I talked about, the AFCC, I don't know if I missed that slide, it's coming up. If you go to their website, they actually have a flow chart to look at shared parenting plans. And that's where this all came from. And it's a really nice workbook. It's free. You just go to their website or you can choose to join the organization and get it. Or if I have it on PDF at the office, if you just email one of my staff, they can send you that copy. What are we looking at with regards to young children? Safety of the child and the parents' care. So that's obviously the first thing. Is the child safe in the care of both parents on one? Are the parents safe with each other? If there's any concerns with regards to those two answers, we're going to start restricting some form of shared parenting. Because of the safety concerns, not only for the child, but maybe for the parent that's been the victim of some form of domestic violence. If those answers are basically yes, they're safe with the parents are safe with each other. What's about the child's trust and security with each parent? We're looking at the bonding. And it doesn't happen a lot, but there are things called bonding assessments that psychologists do that are looking at parent-child relationship. I haven't had like half a dozen in years with regards to that, just because they're very time-consuming and kind of expensive. But we're looking at the child's trust and security with each parent. Do they have a continued relationship with the parent? Are they able to be soothed by the parent? If you visit their home, the child cries, who's the one that picks up the child? Or I guess it wouldn't be in the same home anymore, but is the parent able to soothe the child when they're upset? Or they just kind of ignore it? You see people out in restaurants and things like that, they ignore the kids. What happens at home? If they're willing to be this unattentive to the children from the guardian litem, what happens when you're not around? So take a look at that relationship with that. And again, what about parents' mental health? Do they seem to be sensitive to the child's mental health? This again goes to the fact that they may not like the person, but they understand this is the baby's father, and I want him to have a relationship. If you feel that's sincere, that's better for our prognosis with regards to attachment down the road. Here's the drug and alcohol issues. I was ahead of myself. This is where it starts at. As long as those things are well maintained, you can try to do that research on your own, get somebody's mental health records. I know they're not always easy to get, but I think they're relevant for the guardian litem. If you have somebody that's been hospitalized for a prior suicide attempt or significant mental health issues, or if you're currently under the care of a psychiatrist or psychologist, then you need to get those records and take a look at them, or just ask for a new evaluation to take a look at those things. But they are relevant, especially for the younger child that can't speak for themselves. I said drug and alcohol issues, as long as they're maintained. And you can be in, there's a variety of opinions about substance abuse treatment. I am not a substance abuse counselor, so I don't defer to me. But there are a number of accepted treatments out there, and as long as they're compliant, whether we agree with them or not, I think they get an opportunity to be a parent. I think probably, did she talk about Suboxone and all that stuff? No? Okay. She probably knows more about it. There's a lot of controversy about that, but it's one of those things where if it's done as it was supposed to be done initially, where you take it and it's made to be weaned off it and it's counseling along with it, as soon as, I hope that's similar to what she said, then it can work very well. The problem is you can't keep on somebody for like the next 12 years as they sell out of the street. So you would have to do some research, how compliant. And there's some people that do very well on that, and should have the opportunity to interact with the child. Any questions on that? That's always kind of, she answered most of those. This is the things that impact our child's welfare, whether healthy or unhealthy. These are the things that go in our home at night. Risk, stressors, and vulnerability. Well, we can have a healthy family, and then things come along that cause stress that can impact the attachment issues. Right? Someone loses their job. Someone becomes addicted to painkillers because of an accident. Right? Someone has an affair. Things that can cause stress within the family. Right? So things can function well. Mental health of the parents, stress on the parents affects the relationship with the child, which also affects the relationship with the other parent. So all these things. We're also looking at protective factors. When you're interviewing people, find out who their resources are. So you have a standard question you're asking parents. Who do they talk to when they have problems? Who's within their family? Make sure they have no arrest records. To find out who they talk to their mom, their father, their brother and sister, their pastor, whoever they choose to talk to. What is their support system that can help them through this divorce and through the shared parenting? Other situations that merit caution. Again, these are kind of red flags as you're talking to your client. Special needs children, and this can be a variety of situations, but if they have unique developmental or medical needs, this is going to adjust our shared parenting. Okay? One parent may have to work full time, and the other has the responsibility of taking the child to the doctor. But that's still what needs to happen, and that's what happens to the best of the child. We know that autistic children in general, they've increased the diagnosis. It's not autistic spectrum disorder. They got rid of Asperger's, the DSM-5, I don't know if you're familiar with that. So now almost anybody can qualify. it's a huge diagnostic criteria. Autism spectrum disorder is probably overdiagnosed with that, but the true diagnosis, these people have a great deal of difficulty with change. And it causes them an awful lot of emotional distress. And so if you're dealing with a child that you know truly does have some form of autism, then you need to modify with regards to the shared parenting, because they may not adjust very well, at least at the beginning. Again, can we go slow and steady with regards to helping this child adjust? And it's not to ever prevent this parent from having contact, but the child's more attached to this one for now. And can we slowly integrate this other parent back into this child's life? Right? Because when we're married, we have our separate roles that we do within our family situations. And they only become highlighted when we divorce with regards to these things. Right? So we need to take a look at what those rules were. One parent who may not, again, acknowledge the illness or just has difficulty complying with medical procedures. And you can get the medical records and you can see who shows up with medical forms. We usually request these records when we're doing evaluation. Mom brought them, or dad brought them. Or when he's under dad's care, he misses these appointments. You can take a look at these things to see how well they can comply with the child's health. The only other thing would be a very early child with regards to breastfeeding, and for some reason they're unable to take a bottle with regards to that. And so obviously he's going to have some trouble with that one, and so it needs to stay primarily with the mother. Behavior adjustment. Does the child display any of the following? You can see about 6 or 7 things there. Now I have to clarify this because every child displays these things with it, right, at one time or the other. Right? They're irritable, affective instability, they're up and down. My 7-year-old, as soon as you tell him no, he does his fake annoying cry for a period of time. So there are all these things, or they cry when they separate. I get lots of videos from parents who say, this is what happens at the transitional site, outside of police barracks. And the child cries for me, clings to me when dad picks him up. So, and I'm not disagreeing with that, but you can selectively take videos with these things. Then what you don't see is 5 minutes later in the car, the child's happy and is going around. So you need to kind of assess that. My own, one of these days, I think my kid's going to write a book all the time using these bad examples, but my 7-year-old, when he was about 4 or 5, every time my wife left just to get out of the house for a period of time for some freedom, would cry, which really didn't do my self-esteem much good. But then after about 10, 15 minutes, he was fine. And then I guess he realized there was no other parent left and he just had to be nice to me. So we would be fine. So normally she would sneak out. And if she snuck out, then he wouldn't cry. But if you saw her leave out the door, I assume this maybe happened in some other households, not just me as a father. But if we got divorced, she could have showed this video. The house came from Alexa, and the child crying when she did. So you need to take this with a grain of salt when people like that. Transitions are hard. And if parents don't like each other, or they're dogging, after dad's mean to you, you'll be back on Tuesday, then that's going to play into the child's fears. So you really need to do some exploration when you start to see it. It doesn't mean maybe something bad may not be going on, but most of the time, it's over-anxious parenting. Right? So this is the list of things to look for. Some of the more disturbing things is aggressive in behavior. If you have a 7-year-old that all of a sudden starts sharing parenting with dad, and starts to, I'm not picking on fathers, but starts to wet the bed again with regards to that. That's an aggressive type of behavior. They tend to be red flags in psychology. Assuming there's no medical reason that's caused that. Okay, yeah. Frequency and duration. So not just it happens one time. Factors relating to parenting. I like this little quote. I don't know where, actually Barbara put this on here. I don't know where she got this. Co-parenting is not a competition between two homes. It's a collaboration of parents doing what is best for the child. I was thinking I need to put that up in my office when I see parents who post divorce counseling. That's kind of what is going on. Do they have a successful co-parenting relationship? Were they actually successful parents to begin with? You have some parents who can't parent even when they're married. Lots of disagreements and things along those lines, or pitting the children against each other. And if you get a sense of that, then you're really going to earn money when you're doing this plan, because these are going to be difficult people. So can they communicate civilly about the child? So when you talk to them, if you actually have them in the same room, and we can sometimes bring them in the same room to do our evaluation, are they able to talk about the child without going at it, without lots of self-blame, which is not always easy to do? Can they manage conflicts? So again, you're going to do a historical assessment. How did they handle conflicts in the past? And how are they doing this right now? Can they compromise with regards to the situation? Can they cooperate with schedules, right? Our lives are all complex. And when things change, can our other partner deal with that and work in a decent manner. Do they understand and promote the other role of the child? Again, do they allow contact with the other child? Now, sometimes you've got a parent that's overly involved and will continue to call every day when it's at the other parent's house for the week. I think that's influence. But if you have a very young child, again, I'll use my oldest child now, 20 years old, you can't hear this conversation. I had full custody when he was 3.5. His mom lived out in California. I lived here in West Virginia, actually lived in Chattanooga for the first 9 months. That was a big change from Los Angeles. And so he would contact his mother each night because he was 3.5-year-old child. And so that's a long time to be separated from your parent. So that allowed contact with him. We'd call him after daycare with regards to that, and then right before going to bed. And that continued for quite some time until he was more comfortable with separation. So can your people do that? Do they understand the role of the other parent? And nighttime is very difficult for children. Right? If you ever had a child do their first overnight, did they ever call you back up at like 10, 11 o'clock at night and say they're homesick and they've got to come, or they had a tummy ache is usually what happens. And then come back home. Nighttime is very difficult for young children, and that's when we see the most problems. So many times for young children, we will recommend when we're trying to get the dad back in life or the mom back in life, do an 8-hour day. If they're in the same neighborhood, have the child sleep at mom's and then allow the dad to pick back up the next day, just for a period of time, just to develop that comfort in overnight visits. Are they able to put the child's needs before their own? And you can kind of tell us when you talk to those people. One of the things I recommend when people come in right after divorce is not to date for a year. No one ever listens to them. Because there are tendency to repeat the exact same patterns with regards to that. And they're always out to try to prove that they're the more desirable ones, so they got to date first with that. And so is that what they're focused on? They're bringing other dating partners into the child's life even before the divorce is signed. Okay? Which typically means they're not able to put the child's needs before their own. And many times, obviously, they were dating prior to divorce anyway, which causes the divorce. But can they actually realize that their romantic relationship takes back seat to the relationship with the child until the child adjusts to the separation? Low stress exchange, are they able to exchange at each other's house with no problem, or do you have to set something up at the state barracks to make sure things are safe? Do they not put the child choosing between each other? Now these are general relations. Obviously they're not going to put a 2-year-old choosing between parents, but you'll see this quite a bit in older children. Dogging the other parent. If you want to go with me or go with dad, making the child feel very guilty about the love of the other parent. Do they place the child in a position of basically spying on the other parent? Again, this is not the young children, but if you're talking to the child and you talk about when they come back home to dads or moms, and they talk about, oh, we did this at dad's today, it was really great, and mom gives an impression that they shouldn't talk about that, or that they're punished for that, or they would say things like, if your dad pays child support, we can do things too. And so you're checking out the relationships between parents, and how are they using the child within the relationship format. I'm sure you've seen multiple occasions where the children are placed back as messengers, carrying negative messages back and forth, or feel shameful for loving the other parent, which is a hard thing for a child to feel. Other factors, pragmatic factors, geographical distances with regards to that. The case I was involved was only 2 hours on the interstate, so that was pretty easy. Both parents were, I'm sorry, yes.
So the question I have, or the question that we always have, is typically you have 2 terrible parents.
Yeah.
They're terrible people. But they're decent to their kid. They're just awful to each other.
Right.
So, I mean, if shared parenting is what's best for the child, but then you've got all these other factors, what should we be recommending? Or do we just list all that out and then let the judge make the determination because they want to make it the big bucks?
Yeah, or you can't slap them when they get stupid. But the shared parenting is interesting. They call something called co-parenting. Shared parenting, well, you and I agree. We're going to raise little Johnny okay. Co-parenting is, I hate your guts. And we've got a mediator that's going to come up with, we're not going to communicate, but we agree he's going to be in volleyball, volleyball or sports or whatever, and we try to do with regards to that, maybe utilizing families. When I did this talk at the court system, one of the judges just said, whichever one is the most uncooperative, I just punish them, take the kid away for a period of time until they learn to behave.
Right,
so,
which is terrible.
Yes.
I mean, as a guardian ad litem, when the judge does that, it's awful. You're not punishing the adult, you're punishing the kid. And so they're terrible people.
Right.
I mean, sometimes these
Let it
people
out,
are
let it
so
out.
awful, but they have a great kid
Right.
somehow. So what, I mean, how do we manage
Recessive
that?
genes. I don't know, what do you do? I mean, I think that's part of the cases you get involved in too. We have people, and even if it's been like 2 or 3 years, they continue to come back. They're like the cases that never end. I see kids graduate from high school, that's all. I mean, you can try, the only thing I can think of is somehow the punishment, see if that works, but you're right, that penalizes the child. I don't know anybody have any brilliant solutions currently, I don't. Like 100 people not doing what I do.
I mean, I guess my question is, if you go in and you recommend that, I guess it's not shared parenting, but a 50-50 schedule. I mean, I feel like you place the kid in the middle of these 2 terrible people. So, which is worse? Placing the kid in the middle of these 2 terrible people, or somehow limiting the child's time with one parent? Which one makes us mess up the kid more? Because I don't want to be the one to mess up the kid. Their parents are doing a fine job of that.
Right.
So how do I mess them up? How do I become less responsible for messing them up?
Let me think. Did you hear the question basically on how we not mess up? I'm trying to come up with a solution. I feel like I'm on the stand again. I would probably take a look at one is how the child is and see what their attachment relationship with is. Do they actually maybe get along? Are they closer to one parent than the other? Is one parent maybe at least more responsible with making sure their homework gets done, their extracurricular activities, maybe less evil than the other one? And then can you go maybe a more traditional schedule of, maybe that parent's through the school time and the other one's limited on the weekends, and part of it is this is going to stay this way until, I guess it depends on how old the child. I think it's easier to work with a 12-year-old than it is to work with a 1-year-old, because you can talk to a 12-year-old with regards to that.
Well, I mean, let's think about this. People that do good with shared parenting are people that can work with each other. And that's ideal. But when you've got 2 parents, and if you've got, for instance, domestic violence thrown into that mix.
Right, let me just say, there's terrible people. There's no abuse or neglect. It doesn't rise, because that's what the majority of what we have in family court. It doesn't rise to the level of abuse and neglect, because if it did, they'd be over in circuit court. So, I mean.
So you're saying there's no domestic violence, they just hate each other.
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, I think that's the majority of what we get. And when you put them together, I mean, when you try to compare mother and father, most of the times you look at them and be like, these are both really awful people. I mean, one is not worse than the other in one fashion or another.
I just encourage you to be married.
What do the children want to do?
Well, I mean, so that's my question.
Right.
If we do a shared parenting, and because when that happens, when we do co-parenting with 2 parents who have high conflict, you're ending up with the kid in the middle.
Right.
And most of the time when we have older kids, we find that the kid ends up being the parent for the parents, and that's not fair. So what's worse? What's worse to do to the kid? Limit their time from a parent whom they may want to spend time with, and they don't realize that the parent is messing them up, or putting them in the middle. What's worse? Or is it all equally bad, and we just sort of?
Well, I mean, the way you described it, sounds like, it all sucks. And I do agree with regards to family court cases as opposed to abuse and neglect. I have my abuse and neglect people are more likely to say, yes, I've screwed up. But people in family court, I guess maybe because they're paying their lawyers, almost never take responsibility. It's always the other person's fault. If the child is old enough, and they actually, I keep showing therapy of people, I'll kind of get their opinion about do they have awareness of what's going on. Sometimes they know that mom and dad are screwed up and they're caught in the middle. If I can get some insight into that, maybe what kind of survival techniques can I teach them? And that's not a great solution, because you're right, it sucks for them. And they'll probably pay for it down the road when the kid can move the hell out of the house. Circumstance. If the child's old enough, I'll try to somehow strengthen the residual effect, or if it's just tilted one way or the other, then I might try to be more common with the other. But I don't feel like I'm disappointing you with regards to the answers. I don't think there's any great answer.
There is no answer.
So.
Well, I think you have to look to see how detrimental it is for the child. Is the conflict so bad that it's detrimental to the child. And if it is, then it's not a case in which you recommend co-parenting 50-50, you know? And like he said, then you look to see which parent, regardless of how horrible they are, the child has the bond, the stronger bond with, and provides the best basic needs, such as, you know, getting them to school on time, helping them with their homework, you know, that their work schedule is such that it allows that parent to be more of the school parent versus the weekend parent. I mean, putting children, thinking that co-parenting is the optimal thing and putting them with very high conflict parents, you have to look to make sure that it's not detrimental for that child. Not every set of parents are ideal for co-parenting. And I've had very, very, very educated, successful parents that I literally felt like that they were destroying their children, and that the children would be better off being raised by wolves than being raised by these two parents. And I think at some point, maybe the court needs to order them to counseling, you know, separate counseling, of course, because you don't want to put, I wouldn't want to put another professional in the type of situation that I've been in as a guardian. But
I have to say, we do, every so often we do, I don't do, Ms. Nelson helped with this, because she's actually a retired federal IRS agent, so she has a gun. So we let her do the high conflict, and it's usually like 10 weeks, and we can see if we can get the judges fed up with the case, and just high conflict work, and see if we're any more successful with regards to that. And sometimes we have made progress, or Ms. Nelson has, and sometimes we write the judge and say, they're horrible people, good luck. And you had a question also, I'll get you just a second.
It was just a response to that. One was a high conflict parenting. I don't know whether we still have high conflict parenting or not, but
we have it in some areas, all over the state.
really, really helpful. I saw people who were tearing a child in half, get back together, or come to the next hearing, and they would be
She's
telling
talking
judge.
about the people that went through the advanced child-focused parent education. It used to be high conflict, but we changed the name. So she's saying that she's seen parents come back into court and actually be able to work with each other.
That's one aspect. And the other, I think you can still do a 50-50 plan if the children were wanted with both parents. But you have to separate the parents. You have to order that they don't interfere with each other on their other's time. That there's no contact between each other on the other side. They have no contact at all with each other except for online parent things. And they would have a third party do the transport for them. And, you know, if it's soccer time, only this parent could go to the soccer game. Only this parent, the parent that has a child, would be able to.
And that's that kind of hardcore co-parenting.
That's punishing the other parent more than the child that way.
So, and it's like, again, it's not the ideal, but if they just can't focus. I think somebody else raised their hand.
I'm not advocating for this, but in response to what do you do, I know of one judge that actually did the 96-hour removal and ordered the guardian ad litem to file a petition for abuse and neglect because of the severity of the alienation between the two parents. And it was accepted by circuit court, and they actually became a full-blown abuse and neglect. So I'm not advocating for that, but in really, really severe cases, I guess that's possible.
And you know, clearly we're teaching these children how to deal with conflict really well. The parents can't even communicate or be at the same soccer game. So I'd have to wonder what they're going to be like in their marriages.
And I know we're running out of time with regards to that. The other is when you talk to the parents, even like let's say there's a shared parenting or whatever it is, if they're not going to be there when they're just fighting for the custody on paper for the child, but I'll get you to say on paper, who's actually taking care of the child when they're in that home? Because many times we'll see, we all just use our case examples. The mother was advocating, saying that the child was, couldn't live without her, cried all the time. And then both sides had money in this case, and so she had primary custody, but then they hired a private investigator, and she was rarely at home. They got all the babysitting receipts and records, and so most of the time the child was with somebody else. So obviously it didn't make it look very credible in court with regards to these things. So those are situations. Do they actually spend time? Again, if I'm not going to be there, am I willing to let my ex take care of the child if my child has a problem? That's why it's not going to work with the case that she was just mentioning. But in general, can they cooperate with that kind of building? I'm sorry, somebody raised their hand.
My question isn't much really to do with custody, but what's your opinion on when parents are sent for psychological and then sent for parental fitness exams?
Right.
Should this, because what we have going on in Wood County is the same group does the psychological, then their psychological comes back and just says, well, they need a parental fitness. So then they're sent down to the same group to do the parental fitness. And after so many cases, the recommendations are the same, and there's been some talk that it is not ethical for, under the rules for psychiatrists to do both the psychological and the parental fitness. Should that be done, or should that be going on?
And actually, she's basically, I guess, I never actually heard them going for a psych and then going for parental fitness. Usually they just kind of go for parental fitness, but in that county, they're going for a psychological evaluation, and that practice is recommending going for parental fitness to the same practice. I think that's where you're going to get into a sticky situation, because I'm recommending business to myself, which you run the risk of looking very biased, or I recommend it for in-home family services, and I own the service that provides the service. If I'm referring to myself to make more money off this case, then I think you're running into an ethical, or at least certainly not a best practice thing. So you maybe refer it out, which is, it seems like a weird thing to do a psychological, because we have a lot of the same tests. I mean, there's only so much crap out there that we use the test with that. So you're always going to take an MMPI or PIA or something on those lines. So, but I don't know that group, but I'll be concerning if you're starting to see a pattern. And if they're already in abuse and neglect hearings, they're probably going to need a parental fitness anyway, so I'm not quite sure why they go, because now you're billing twice. And if you're given the exact same test twice, then I've now billed for the same information. If it's been less than 6 months, it's still good.
Aside from the billing, don't you get into the issue of treatment versus forensic evaluation?
It would depend. If they were sent just for a psychological evaluation, that would still be a non-treating if it's a form mess. Now, if they were actually there to treat, like if she was my patient and all of a sudden she's in trouble, and I say, yeah, I can do a psych eval for the court, then you're 100% correct. I should never do that. So are they treating the person or just for the psych eval?
They're not treating, they're just going down for the psych eval. This is an abuse and neglect case, but I'm never going to be here tomorrow, but they're sitting them down for a psychological as part of their term. The psychological just comes back and basically gives their IQ and then says send them down for parental fitness. And then in about 3 more weeks, they go back to the same group in Barbersville and they do a parental fitness. But when I asked the group, and I said, how can you keep doing this? They said, well, if they were self-pay and we were treating them, we couldn't do it, but because the state's paying for both, we can do it. I just didn't think that was
I think it smells a bit, because again, and it goes along with Mr. Thorne's concerns, you know, am I somehow changing my opinion with regards to that thing? If I'm referring again to somebody, you know.
Did I just hear you say that it's the exact same examination to do both?
Well, it depends on what they're doing. Psychological evaluation, a forensic evaluation, obviously, is just anything related to court. So, but a psychological evaluation, it's a very generic term. It could be because your doctor wants to know if you need to be on antidepressant. But there's only so many psychological tests that are good. There's thousands out there, so there's only so much that's going to hold up to the Delaware standard. So we have like the Webster Intelligence Test. You're going to see that a lot. You're going to see an achievement test, such as the wide range achievement, or the Woodcock-Johnson. You're going to see the NMPI-2RF, or the PAI. They all hold up in court. They are designed with regard to these things. Some of the other tests we use, mental stress index, things along those lines, are okay. You can use in conjunction with other tests because they don't have a lot of validity scales. And that was surprising. Sometimes people lie on their psychological evaluation. So we need to find the bull crappers out. And some of our tests are very good, and some aren't so much. And so if I've tested you 3 months ago, and I give you a full IQ test, and I bring you back, and now I bill the state again for another IQ test, unless you're in some kind of traumatic brain injury, then that's just, you don't get any super in the next 3 months unless you've had some spiteful so yeah, I mean, that's weird with regards to that. I don't know that practice and don't kind of get into that. But you need to be careful if it's self-serving. with that. You don't want that to impact, once I do the parental fitness evaluation, I'm now recommending in-home services that a parent company did, or something along those lines. And so you would hope that we would, because we all have, just like you have your ethical standards, and we have our ethical standards, that we hope that we would fall.
And here's the thing, I mean, unless we think there's some type of mental illness or there is some type of IQ deficiency, I'm not really sure why we're doing psychological evaluations in these type of cases instead of parental fitness. And that's just, it's not, I don't have any medical degree or anything like that, but, I've read I've read 100 of, or more, probably thousands of the psychological with the IQ stuff, and, well, I can't, I couldn't anymore make a recommendation based upon that report than, somebody off the street. And so, I just don't understand why we're doing so many of these.
She said that was abuse and neglect, not family court.
Right, but not even abuse and neglect, if you had concerns about it, obviously by the time you get to abuse and neglect, there's some contracts going on. That's why they're abuse and neglect for that. And so, I don't know why you need a general. You have specific, psychology works best when you give a specific referral question, no different than the criminal aspect. What do you want me to look for? I may not find it, but what are your concerns? Do you have concerns about the ability to provide a safe and secure environment for this child, given the age of the child or any limitations of this child? If that's your referral question, that's a parental fitness, and that's what I have to do. I will design my testing to do that. Now, we have a lot of similar tests, such as the MMPI, you can utilize in a number of ways, but there are other tests. Or if you're looking at competency to stand trial, competency to testify, there are specific things. A general psych, in all honesty, is like a horoscope. It's almost useless with regards to that. It doesn't answer a specific question. And so I'd be a little bit leery about a very general, which put myself out of some business, but I was very leery about just getting a general psych. We're a profession that needs a specific referral. And many times, if you have an expert that you like and you work with, they should be talking to you, what are you looking for? What are your concerns about this parent? And please give me all the documentation that you have. Because a psych eval is just a snapshot of that person. And it means crap, but you don't see the rest of it in context of everything else. And so your input to the expert witness is invaluable. I see a number of common faces that I think I work with. And so, because you see a lot more of the cases of that case than we do. And so input that you would give the expert witness is phenomenal with that. And so just to do the psych eval without doing collaterals or looking at all the records or not talking to you, it's not worth its money. It's being paid for. I know we're just out of time. Hang on a second. There's a couple of resources you can look. The American Psychological Association, they have a lot of, if you just type in a number of things on child care and attachment issues. There are a lot of PDFs with regards to that. The American Bar Association has some phenomenal PDFs you can download with regards to custody. The Association of Family and Conciliation Courts, I would encourage you to join that. It's not very much per year. They have a phenomenal quarterly journal, and they have lots of resources, and it's designed really for a lot of guardian lines. It's looking at psychology and legal aspects. You get to talk to other psychologists and go to conferences, and I get to talk to lawyers on that. In general, there is no cookie-cutter plan. Look at the child. If the attachment issues are strong in both, still proceed somewhat slowly. Usually one parent tends to have more attachment. That's just how marriages work. Right? Whatever agreement you came up with, either if the mom works full-time and the dad stays home, or even they both work full-time, the reality is the majority of the time the child's a newborn, the mom is doing most of the work. So we respect that and slowly bring dad up to speed with regards to that. So take a look at the actual attachment and how they can cooperate. You just can't all of a sudden go week on, week off. They are a vulnerable population. If you have any questions, I know I'm more than happy to stay, or I think I'm the only Saar in the home book. Just Google search me up. I'll talk about that. So.